going on, everybody? Welcome to the Coach's Podcast, the number one podcast for teenagers. I'm your host, Coach Williams, and my mission is to transform the lives of teenagers by changing the way that they think. You see, on this podcast, we're going to talk about mental health, we're going to talk about trauma, we're going to talk about healing, because I believe that everybody deserves to heal. And I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking already. You're like, I am not a teenager. Some of you. I believe that if you're not chronologically a teenager, or you may not chronologically be a teenager, but you may, just maybe dealing with teenage problems. Maybe the way that you're thinking is due to a trauma that happened in your teenage years. Maybe the way that you are acting is due to the attitude that your mom showed you when you were a teenager. I don't know what that thing is, but I believe that everyone deserves to have a transformed life. Y'all, and I do this through two realms. I do this through education and I do this through social media. I believe that most teenagers spend most of their time in school and on social media. And so here we go. Y'all, I want to remind you guys, like I'm not even gonna front today. I'm not even gonna front. I'm feeling a little heavy today. I'm feeling a little heavy. We're gonna talk about some stuff today. We're going to talk about some stuff, but remember, man, you got to go on a roller coaster with me. It's going to be a roller coaster of emotions. You'll see me lean back. Y'all, I had to put some WD-40 in this chair so it wouldn't squeak. You'll see me lean back. You'll see me take deep breaths. You'll see me taking pauses. That's because I regulate myself. And I hope by watching this, you're learning regulation tips yourself. Y'all, shout out to Clarity Media. Shout out to my brother, Lee Hall. He owns a business called Clarity Media. He is hosting my podcast. If you have an idea of a podcast, you think you need to start a podcast, or if you have a story to tell, reach out to Lee. You can either directly DM me or you can email him at connect@claritymedia.life. Again, that's connect@claritymedia.life. Y'all, he is a good guy and you really want to utilize him. If you are someone who is looking to sponsor my podcast, y'all, there are a lot of things that I need. There are a lot of things that I need, like a teleprompter, like soft lighting, and it goes beyond what I need. It allows me to enhance my equipment and get a camera or whatever the case may be, so this word can go out. So if you're a sponsor, if you have the means to sponsor, please sponsor the Coach's Podcast, where we transform teenage lives by changing the way that they think. I got one last special shout out, and that's to my wife. I say the best for last. Shout out to Chandra. Y'all, Chandra is a real one. You understand what I'm saying? Chandra is a real one, and I appreciate her so much. Shout out to my wife. Listen, if you haven't watched my last one, you better stop. And you got to go watch it. You got to go watch it, because in the last one, I talked to you about how to identify your trauma. Remember, we're in a series. We're in a series of videos, series of podcasts that's going to teach you how to put ice on your hurts so that your life can become healed. And ICE is an acronym. And the I stands for identify your trauma. Today, we're going to talk about the C, and that is communicate your trauma. But before I get there, I want you guys to remember, I went over a few key things last week. The first thing that I went over, I told you that a trauma is a person or a situation that has hurt you. Who has hurt you? What has hurt you? What situation has hurt you? I also talked to you about the 3 levels of your brain. Do y'all remember what they were? You had the conscious, you had the subconscious, and then you had the unconscious mind. The conscious mind is the part of the brain that you think in. For an example, what time is it? Don't say it out loud. What time is it? I'm sitting here looking at the time myself because I gotta make sure I'm out of here in a timely manner. But don't answer that out loud. That's your conscious, what you think. Typically, your conscious is the good angel and a bad angel. Your subconscious mind is the level right below your conscious, and that's your subconscious is the fuel for your conscious mind. So everything you consciously think about comes from the subconscious mind. Underneath the subconscious mind is the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind are those repressed traumas, or those things that you have buried down for a very long time and you can't even remember it. That's in your unconscious mind. And your unconscious fuels your subconscious, and your subconscious fuels your conscious. That's why it's important for you guys to learn, listen to me, how to consciously be in your subconscious. When you consciously learn how to be in your subconscious, then you can easily navigate your unconscious thoughts. It's like a chain reaction, you know what I mean? And so today, I want to talk to you about communicating your trauma. You see, the crazy thing about it is that trauma gets passed down generationally, and it also goes uncommunicated generationally. Here's what I mean. Your parent has went through a trauma, because one in every four people have gone through trauma, and two in every three teenagers have gone through trauma. Okay? So your parents have gone through a trauma, but you don't know anything about it. That's called an uncommunicated trauma. And because your parent doesn't talk about trauma, you don't even know what a trauma is. Trauma is probably new to your definition. I mean, to your dictionary. It's probably new to your vocabulary. I mean, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Trauma was new to my vocabulary maybe 2 years ago. Like, I knew what it meant, but I did not know trauma applied to me. I did not know that I had trauma in my subconscious. And then when I thought about the traumas of my subconscious, more traumas from my unconscious mind came to my subconscious. And I know a lot of y'all don't really want to go through that. Y'all don't really want to be that self-aware. But I'm trying to tell you, like, unlocking that trauma is the secret to life. Trauma, like not talking about your trauma, not communicating your trauma, is like being in a prison, being in a jail cell, and you got the key to get out of. The key to get out of your trauma, or the key to get your trauma out of your head, is you communicating. You got to talk to it. You got to talk about it to somebody. It cannot go uncommunicated. Has somebody ever asked you what's wrong with you, and you be like, nothing? Oh, you're such a liar. I'm sorry, that wasn't nice. You, you be like, nothing. Or you be like, I don't want to talk about it. Nothing. I don't want to talk about it. Or sometimes you just don't have the words. Sometimes there's you know something is wrong with you, but you just don't have the words to express what's wrong with you. That's called uncommunicated trauma. And we never learn how to talk about those things because no one ever displays it. Well, if you're watching this podcast and that's you, I hope that you're taking notes, because I'm about to show you how to communicate your trauma. And then I'm going to give you tips on how to do it yourself. I'm just a template. You don't have to do it exactly how I do it. Obviously, I'm a pontificator. Look it up. Obviously, I'm an orator. Look it up if I said it right. I'm a good communicator. A lot of you guys may not know how to talk. Talking is actually a skill. I don't care if you're an introvert. I don't care if I don't care what side of the railroad tracks you lie on. Talking is a skill. And if you want to be able to heal your life, you need to learn how to talk about your trauma. You don't have to do it on a podcast. Everybody's not called with the calling that I have, and that's to talk about it on a podcast. But I adamantly believe that if you want to live a healed life, you need to speak your truth. Somebody put speak your truth in the comment section. Speak your truth. It's important to speak your truth, because if you don't, you become insecure and fearful. Insecure is when you don't really believe in yourself. You think that there's something wrong with you. You think that you're ugly. I'm going to park right there and I'm going to talk about that. Why is it that you find identification in being pretty? Where do you get the idea of being pretty from? I'm talking to my young ladies. Where do you get the idea of being pretty? Like what you look on social media, a movie, because everybody in the movies are skinny and got a face job. So now you think that if you ain't skinny, or you're not wearing makeup, that you're not pretty. So now you're wearing all of this makeup, and the makeup that you're wearing is cheap makeup. And so because you're wearing this cheap makeup, now you got black stains and stuff underneath on your eyes, because you thought, and it all stems from you thinking that you're not pretty. And you don't think you're pretty because nobody affirmed you and constantly told you that you're beautiful just the way you are. Shout out to Bruno Mars. Y'all won't understand that. I mean, he said amazing, but anyway. Why do you find self-worth in how you look? That's an insecurity. An insecurity is when you're not secure in yourself. You look in a mirror and you see something wrong with you. The reason why you're insecure is because of a trauma. I'm telling you, it could be something somebody said, something somebody didn't say. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you didn't have a father in your life that really like poured into you. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you didn't have it. You start to overcompensate if you don't communicate. That's a bar. You start to overcompensate if you don't communicate. Let me tell you what overcompensate means in Gen Z terms. You start doing too much. You're doing too much, fam. You need to chill out. But you overcompensate because there is an empty part of you and you don't want nobody to see the empty part of you. So you start all of these businesses. You don't want nobody to see the empty part of you. So you date all of these boys or all of these girls. You don't want anybody to see the empty part of you. So you get married quick. You're overcompensating for something that happened to you. And when you overcompensate, you start to project how you feel on other people, or you start to project how you think on other people. So now when you walk in rooms or classrooms or your job, you think that everybody always talking about you. Ain't nobody talking about you, fam. You ain't that important to them. I'm leaning in. I gotta relax. That's why it's important to communicate your trauma. That's why it's important to speak your truth. And today, I'm going to speak my truth. And by speaking my truth, I hope that you are encouraged to speak yours too. Now, remember, you can only speak your truth. You can only communicate your trauma if you've identified it. Most of us got like 3, 4, 5, 6 traumas. I got a few of them. Today, I'm going to just talk about one. I'm trying to figure out where to put my water bottle. I told you guys on the last episode that as a young boy, maybe around the ages of 6 to 9, I was sexually abused. This is very difficult for me to talk about as I'm still navigating the effects of it. I myself, I'm still not completely healed of the effects of that yet. Everything that I'm telling you, I have to go through constantly. So I constantly have to ice it. It's not a one-time deal. It's over and over. And yeah, it's unfortunate because some people are navigating out there with a free mind. Shout out to Tim's. I'm feeling musical today. But those of you that's dealing with a trauma, man, it's tough. And even if you hadn't had a trauma, it's important for you to understand what a trauma is because you may have a friend that has gone through a trauma. Remember, 2 out of every 3 teenagers have gone through a trauma, and 1 out of every 4 adults or people. So make sure that you have that safe space. And it's just important for you to express yourself. It's important for you to express your trauma. I told you guys last week, I told you guys last week that I was sexually abused continuously by a family member. I can't remember how old I was. Maybe around the ages of 5 to 9, 6 to 9, somewhere around in there. And so over the last 2 years, I've been processing what it's done to me. I've been processing and going back into my teenage years. While I'm not going to talk about the abusers because I'm not emotionally mature enough to talk about the abuser, I am going to talk about the effects that it had on my life. And I better plug in my battery before my laptop go dead. Hold on. Give me a second. All right. We about to get this thing good. Boom. All right. I'm solid. Sorry about that. Where was I at? But I'm going to talk about the effects of it. I remember, man, growing up, always feeling like that I needed to belong. I felt like that I always needed to belong because my innocence was taken away from me. I wasn't confident in myself. I didn't have anybody to talk to. Y'all, I kept this trauma a secret for 20 years. Y'all, I'm 30. I didn't talk about it till I was about 28. The only person that I talked about it with was with my wife, Chandra. And I told her at the very beginning of us dating, but I kind of brushed it off and said I didn't want to talk about it. And so I suppressed it down to my subconscious. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to express it. So I suppressed it in my subconscious. And because I suppressed it in my subconscious, I kept repressing it, and it led to oppression. Oppression is where something is cruel or unusual punishment over a time period. My trauma began to oppress me. It began to take over my life because I did not express it. I didn't know how to express it. I didn't know who I could talk to because trauma wasn't talked about when I was a boy. It wasn't talked about, y'all. And if I'm being honest, they're like, why did you hold it for 20 years, man? Like, number one, because I was protecting my abuser, and number two, like I didn't want to get in trouble. I thought that I was going to get in trouble. I thought that I was going to get in trouble, and I was protecting my abuser. Now, and now, of course, now that I'm 30, hindsight's 2020. Of course, I wouldn't get in trouble, but get in trouble. But when I was growing up, trauma wasn't really talked about. The mental health age really just started. What is mental health? Why do you think so many people are so cuckoo? Because we don't take we what is mental health? We haven't been taught what mental health is, especially those of us that's in my black community. We've been taught that trauma, we see therapy and trauma like as a white person deal, or we see therapy and trauma as boring and or so like boring and corny and cheesy because we grow up and our parents always tell us what stays in this, what goes on in this house stays in this house. And you bet not run out there telling my business. And so we're not taught to talk. And I wasn't taught to talk. I like, and it makes me a little angry when I think about it because I feel like I've wasted a lot of my years. Now, of course, that was foundational for me. I see that now, but if I knew then what I'm telling you now, my life would have been accelerated. If I knew then what I'm telling you now, my life would have been accelerated. I would have believed in myself a little bit more. I would have took that leap of faith more. I would have been in the top 10 of my class, but I didn't believe in myself. So I always performed subpar because I had this trauma buried in my unconscious mind. I wasn't even thinking about it no more. I was just operating. I was a functioning trauma victim. I was functioning in my trauma. I told y'all that last week. I was like, man, I had all A's and B's. Man, I had accolades. I had awards. You know what I'm saying? But I was really just flowing. I was really just doing something really deep inside. Man, I'm mad and I'm angry and I'm always wanting the approval of somebody else. And I'm not even knowing why. Now I know the reason why I wanted that is because of what happened to me in my adolescent years when I wasn't even a teenager, when I was 6 through 9, but it impacted me so much because because once you're exposed to something like that at an early age, it opens the door for more evils in your life. Parents, that's why it's important to pay attention to your kids. That's why it's important to notice what they're doing. That's why it's important to notice their personality because their personality can switch and you can be so flippant that you think that they're just a teenager. No, there's something wrong with them and you really need to dig because what happened to them as a kid is the foundation to who they are as a teenager. And who they are as a teenager is important for who they are in their 20s. I believe that decisions and traumas take about a period of 10 years to cycle around. Think about what I said. When I got sick, I was abused, molested when I was 6. And I was highly promiscuous, which means I slept around a lot when I was a teenager, 16. And I'm not knowing why. And then when I'm not knowing how to lead in my marriage, I'm like, what's going on in my 20s? It goes decades. And so if you're in the 40s or 50s and you listening into this, God, you got to go back a few decades. And it's tough and it's hard. I know. That's why I'm here for these teenagers because Satan is coming for y'all. Satan is coming for y'all through traumas. He came for me, but I am a survivor. Shout out to Destiny's Child. I'm a survivor. And I want to teach you how to survive too. I don't want you to waste time like I did. And it wasn't my fault. I just didn't know how. I want everybody that's listening to this to understand this. You are not a product of your trauma. You are not a product of what you have been through. There is nothing wrong with you. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. If I could look the teenage me, if I could go back in time and look him dead in his eye, man, I would tell him, I would lean into him. I would tell him that you are a creative. You are needed. There is nothing wrong with you. You are a genius. You are handsome. I would tell him that the world needs him, but I can't go back and tell him that. However, I can tell you that. I can tell you that. And I can tell you that by communicating what you went through will save your life. You have to talk about it with. Now I know I'm really only scratching the surface about what went through me, and that was what I went through, and that was intentional. But I want you guys to know that if I'm a man able to talk about that, then you're able to talk about yours too. I want to give you some wisdom on how to do it. I want to give you some wisdom on how to speak your truth. Number one, talk about it with somebody. Please talk about it with somebody. It's important to talk about it with somebody because friends can comfort you and walk you through it. You can talk to therapists, you can talk to parents, you can talk to a school counselor, you can talk to your best friends. And you may be like, man, I didn't go through that. I'm not going through a trauma. Well, it's important for you to create a safe space too, because like I said earlier, your friend is probably navigating through it. You should ask questions like, hey, is there anything that I need to know about you that I don't know? You should be able to listen to your friends and be able to hear when they're sad and be able to pour into them. Create that safe space. And a lot of the times your friends are going to say nothing. That's because they feel like that they don't have anybody to talk to, because somewhere in your life, somewhere in their life, somebody shut them down. Somebody said, stop talking. Somebody said you talk too much. Somebody said, we don't talk about that stuff. They said men don't cry. Men shouldn't cry. And so now subconsciously you're actually thinking that you don't need to talk. You don't know how to cry. That's how your friends feel. So they be like nothing and they just boo-hooing and crying. And then they go the whole day without saying anything because they don't have a safe space. You have to make sure you're creating a safe space. You have to make sure that you're creating the same safe space that you would want for yourself. You got to make sure you do that. Number two, you got to be transparent and vulnerable. Being transparent means that you tell the truth when somebody asks how you're doing. Hey, how you're doing? Man, listen. Man, my mama yelled at me this morning, and she was tripping for no reason. I was tired. I came home. Yeah, I left the clothes in the middle of my floor, but I really didn't mean to because I had a whole lot of homework to do. And so she got on to me this morning before school. So, man, I really ain't feeling it. That's transparency. Vulnerability means being able to tell the truth when nobody asks you. So, are you able to volunteer information? Hey, hey, Ashley, I want to talk to you about something today. I ain't never talked to anybody. I've never talked about this to anybody before. Can I trust you? Can you take this to the grave? It's important for you to be transparent and vulnerable. And in order to be transparent and vulnerable, it's important for you to not fragilize yourself or the person you're talking to. Here's what I mean by fragilize. When you get a package in the mail and it says fragile, that means something can break. So when you fragilize yourself, you say stuff like, I'm not strong enough. I can't talk about this. Or I'm good, because you don't want to cry. But really inside, you're really not good. When I say fragilize the other person, you say stuff like, they'll never understand. Oh, my parents won't get it. They won't do this. They won't do that. They'll never understand what I'm going through. What if you were the person to heal your parents from their trauma by identifying and communicating your trauma? What if you're the person to heal your spouse or heal your boyfriend or girlfriend by identifying and communicating your trauma? And by identifying and communicating your trauma, they do it. They do the same thing you do. What if you're that person for your family? If you're listening to this, you are that person. You are the person to break generational trauma in your family. You just got to run the play. You gotta engage. You gotta talk. We gotta talk this out. You gotta do the homework. How many of y'all did the homework of identifying your trauma last week? You gotta put the work in. You gotta put the work in, because you may be that person that heals your whole family. So don't fragilize them. Talk about it. And if you don't have anybody in your family, you gotta have somebody you trust. Number three. You need to write about it and how it makes you feel. Y'all know I'm a teacher. I've been in education for like 10 years now, and I'm very big on social emotional learning. I get my data is so good because of social emotional learning and restorative practices and stuff like that. And so in my class, I always tell my kids to journal. Last year, I had a student who was like, "Coach, I don't know how to journal." And then I taught him how to journal. And then she said, "Coach, my hand starts hurting. So I don't like journaling." I said, "Your hand starts hurting because you're writing too fast. You're tense. You're holding the pen real tight and you're writing fast. You're trying to hurry up because you don't like to spend time in your head. You don't like to spend time alone. So you never put down your phone. And so now when you journaling, it's like your hand is real tense. I'm my day. I feel like this. Slow down. Take a deep breath and write about your trauma and how it makes you feel. There is no time limit on journaling. You may only write one sentence. You may write two sentences. You may write for 5 minutes. Some of y'all may write for 30 minutes. You can go slow, pause, take breaks. Stop rushing it. You got to write about it. You have to express it. So that way, you have to express your trauma so that way your trauma doesn't oppress you. So that way it doesn't hang around and cause cruel and unusual punishment for years and years and years to come. So write about it. Everything you write on a paper is true. Nobody sees it. Y'all, I have like two journals right here. I got one right here. Shout out to RJ. I got one over there. I got two over there. And I got two completed ones over there. Y'all, I write. And sometimes it's hard to make time for it, but you got to express it so it doesn't oppress you. You may be writing about it for a year or two before you ever express it or communicate it. There's no time limit. There's no limit on identifying your trauma. Let me make that clear. You may still be identifying your trauma even while you're listening to this podcast now about how to communicate it. It's not a rush. There's no rush. There's no time limit. You got to write about it, how it makes you feel, and then eventually let somebody read what you wrote. That's another way of communicating it. When it's hard for me to talk about stuff, I write about it, and then I have Chandra read it. And she reads it. When I write about it, it gives me time to actually think about it, write it, and then pause, read it. It's a lot of digestion. That's why I'm so self-aware. And listen, I know talking about trauma and mental health is real heavy. As I get ready to get out of here, it's real heavy, but I'm telling you, it's the key to transforming your life from hurting to healing. You may be healing your whole life, and that's okay. But healing is certainly better than hurting. And so I encourage all my listeners to heal. And you heal by putting ice on what's causing inflammation in your life. Remember, speak your truth. Go to therapy, talk to your doctor, talk to your parents, talk to your friends. You have to be able to communicate your trauma. Y'all, I love you. That's my time. Make sure you digest all of this and take notes on it. I can't wait to talk about next week on how to embrace you for who you are. Y'all share this with somebody. Don't forget to like and comment, engage with me. Thank you guys so much. That's my time. I love you. Bye.